Well, the painting process for me begins out in the wood shop. All of the paintings today that I do, I begin on, I work on a 1/4-inch plywood, and this plywood is mounted on a poplar 1x2 structure that has crossbar supports in the back, and all of that has, the plywood is mounted flush on the surface of this framing device. That has to be sanded and primed and sanded and primed 3 and 4 times before the painting can even begin. The edges are then painted black so that a person could either frame it or not. It's certainly a finished surface by the time the painting is finished. So long before the painting process is begun, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes. It's not always quite as glamorous. It's just standing in front of an easel and a canvas and doing the painting process. Also, the influence for my paintings comes mostly from my travels. I've really been fortunate over my adult life, to be able to travel quite a bit, and I'm really influenced by a lot of European architecture, the history, the culture, that kind of thing. Been to Latin America, China, Indonesia, and I love just the cultural influences that I see. Another thing that really influences my work a great deal is the light and shadow that I find in architectural settings. It's always been an important aspect of my painting, even when I was more of a representational painter. Over the years, the painting went from representational to quite abstract and is now back to sort of in between. I consider myself a contemporary figurative painter right now. But you'll find a large influence or a large component of the paintings has to deal with light and shadow. I love the mystery, I love the drama that's created with the shadows. I love the symbolic references in light and shadow. To me, it's an important design element as well as an element for content and narrative. Once I get the composition down, and again, I am influenced. I take a lot of photographs when I travel, use the photographs often for architectural references. Sometimes there's figures in them, but more often than not, I add the figures to it and create a story that tells a story that I create in my own mind. It's really not important to me that the viewer gets the story or gets the story that I thought about or that I intended. I really like the idea of the viewer creating their own story to go with it. I find that often more interesting than the story I began with. The figures in the work for me that, like I said, oftentimes I'll see figures there that are doing things, interacting. It almost becomes like a voyeur sitting there watching people and imagining what's going on in their lives. And I create the stories in my mind. And if the figures aren't there, then I often put them in there and create a story about what's going with them, or their relationships with the people, their relationships with the environment, or what they're not doing often. Sitting there in isolation and in thought is often one of the components in these paintings. Once I come up with an idea, I come up with an architectural setting for the paintings to begin. I either look for figures or create the figures. Dealing with the composition is a very early aspect of the paintings. Getting it down compositionally. I feel like if you don't have a good composition in the beginning, it's never going to happen later. I mean, things change. The painting does take on a life of its own, certainly, which is a really important thing that I have learned to watch for over the years. I never feel like I'm locked in to something in the beginning. Once the design is down, that can change somewhat, but it does happen early, and then the painting grows and takes on a life of its own. Often when I'm painting, I may not have a real conscious thought for an hour or 2 hours at a time, and then there comes a point where you have to step back and evaluate the work and see what's happening and watch for the surprises, watch for the things that, oh wow, this is working, I don't want to touch this, or I really want to play this up, and or maybe there's something that just needs to go away in the painting completely. So that other parts of the painting can develop and take over. But it's watching for this this life as the painting grows. You begin with an idea, but then the painting just takes off. It has its own mind, it seems like sometimes. It's often fun to paint, till late at night. I'm kind of a night person. I love to paint at night, and then you get up the next morning and you walk in and you go, oh wow, what wasn't quite aware that's exactly what happened. So, but it's a fun thing to see, to look at it the next day with new eyes and fresh eyes and see what's taken place.